Buddha! Sideways will be in a parade tomorrow night with me. The Halloween party tomorrow night. Big parade coming down Decatur Street tomorrow night, okay? Now, guys, you see this building over here to the left? It's a mall now, but it officially opened up 1891, and it brewed Jack's beer. They had labor disputes, and they had fires, and they finally shut it down in 1972. You know what they did the day they shut it down? What? They poured all the beer into the street, man. The worst case of alcohol abuse in New Orleans history.
Oh my God.
It was a horrible day. Walgreens sold out of straws. It was terrible.
Oh my God.
All right, so their cars can make a lot of noise. I'm not impressed. They do that a lot, try to stop. Alright. Right across the street didn't always look this pretty. When the French got here in 1718, they called this the Place d'Armes. The Spanish came along and called it the Plaza de Armas. This was a dusty old military parade ground at one time called the Place of Arms. I just spoke in 3 different languages. Educated on Bourbon Street, I was. In the middle is a statue of Old Hickory Andrew Jackson, the guy who spearheaded the Battle of New Orleans, and he also was the 7th President of the United States. This would dedicate him in 1851, this reconstruction of this area right here, okay? That statue didn't get here until 1856. Right? Right behind him, that gorgeous building that sits in the center, that's the St. Louis Cathedral. And she's the oldest active Catholic cathedral in North America. There's now 49 bodies buried underneath the floor there, mostly bishops and archbishops. There's a couple rich colonial dudes under there too, and I'll tell you about one in a second. The building on the left side is the original government building of this country, of this city. That's the Cabildo. And on the second floor of that building is where they signed the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. The building on the right side is the old presbytere. Used to house the Capuchin monks at one time. Those 3 buildings were destroyed by the Great Fires of 1788. Rebuilt, financed by a man named Don Alamaster Rojas. Buried underneath the board of St. Louis Cathedral. Now his daughter, Michiel, she had an arranged marriage with her cousin, the Baron Pontalva. So they went to live with his old man in France. And when the husband died, the old man found out that he wasn't going to get much of that Alamaster money, so he kept Michiel captive in the bedroom. Signed over the papers, right? She never gave in. It went on for 24 years. So one night after a couple bottles of wine, he went upstairs with a loaded pistol and shot her in the chest. Blew off 4 of her fingers. We saw what he did, he reloaded and shot himself. He died, she lived, payback's a wonderful thing. So Michiel comes back to New Orleans in the 1840s. She sees it falling apart. So she gets busy and she builds that red brick building behind you, 1849, and the one in front of you, 1851. Those twins are called the Pontalva Apartments, built by the Baroness. Those are the oldest luxury apartments in the Western Hemisphere. I start talking more like a pirate at the end of the week. Now look at the alleyway between the church and the Cabildo. Right behind the Cabildo, you see a white building peering out, right? That's the old jailhouse. And the night before the Battle of New Orleans, General Jackson released the pirates into the alleyway. They met them 7 miles downriver the next morning, and that's how we beat the Brits in the Battle of New Orleans. Pirates, Kentuckians, Tennesseans, Choctaw Indians, and a whole regiment of free people of color. That's why we call that alleyway Pirates Alley. And that's Jackson Square, man. Both those buildings are museums. Go there tomorrow. Katrina Mardi Gras exhibit. New Orleans artifacts on this one. Now, Michiel Pontalva designed those buildings, and she also put in and had made for her in Spain the first cast iron introduced to this country. In every section, there's the family crest with the letters A and P, Alamaster Pontalva. See it? Clear up to the vents on the top.
Oh, yeah.
Now, She never remarried. And if you go to the Cabildo building, there's a portrait of her, and you'll know why. Her unibrows could have started their own colony at one time. Forgive me, Mickey Ellen. Nice girl, great personality, you know. See that? See it up close? Guys, that's the original. There is an ordinance in the city that if you're going to play your music that loud, you should have a hot car. So, under Spanish rule, there's 2 major fires, over 1,000 buildings perished. So the Spanish rebuilt the French Quarter in the 1790s. You see that green building? It's one of my favorite places. That's a 1790s Spanish Creole townhouse. Someone's house at one time. See around the gallery? That's wrought iron, not cast. That, whenever you see wrought iron, that building was built during the Spanish Reconstruction. That's now the 2nd oldest restaurant in New Orleans. That's Tujac. They've been serving food and drinks there since 1856. They are celebrating their 200th anniversary this year. That's where I start my walking culinary cocktail cemetery stories. You know why? Those are real mixologists in there, man. Okay, that's the place that created the grasshopper drink. Right there, Sazerac. Ramus Gin Fizz, those are New Orleans crafted drinks, not sex on the beach and Jello shots, okay? You guys are guilty, I know you are. Kool-Aid drinks with Everclear in them, that's Bourbon Street. How? Get that. So the Creoles had these buildings built along Decatur Street with the storefront on the bottom and family dwellings on the top. These are called row houses. This was all open market to the river at one time. Whenever you see columns, those were put in during the American era. That's Greek revival. Now, if you go back at least 60 years and look at photographs of the French Quarter, you're going to see a lot of Sicilian names. That's a Sicilian grocery right there. The home of the Macbalada. Watch out. Central Grocery. That statue has nothing to do with our history. That would be Joan of Arc. And if you missed that photo up, there's another one just like that in Paris. Have you been to the French market?
Yeah.
Did you have a soft shell crab po' boy?
Oyster.
There it is, guys. Spearheaded by the Spanish in the 1790s. Guys, before these were for hire, up until the early 1970s, at 5:30 in the morning, horse and wagon would gather all around here to pick up their fruits and vegetables and produce and disperse into the streets of New Orleans. You could literally make groceries from your kitchen window back in the day. Right out of here, man. So, from the early morning to the late afternoon, this is what you would hear in the streets of New Orleans. I got watermelon. I got okra. You can peek out your window, peek out your door all day long. So I'm going to put you in the opening scene of one of the best movies that was ever filmed here. It's a woman with horse and wagon and she's selling crawfish. See those buildings facing us right down there? That's Frenchman Street. That's where all the jazz, blues, and brass bands are. We don't go to Bourbon Street unless we got a gig or you guys take us there. Ain't paying $9 for a Kool-Aid drink. Even if they do give you 2 at a time. Now, we're in the French Quarter for the first time in this trip. All these buildings in the French Quarter are under historical register. You cannot change anything on the outside of these buildings the envelope has to stay the same. So when I'm looking at that brown building right there, I see a balcony and it's got wrought iron. A little bit different design than Tujague's, but that's 1790s Spanish Creole townhouse. This one right here is a gallery with cast iron on the other side. You know, those didn't get here until after the Pontabla apartments because that was the first cast iron. All these are under historical register. Cannot change the envelope on the outside. See the big yellow one on the corner? That's a 1790 Spanish Creole. That was built in the 1960s. The original building was demolished and laid an empty lot there for decades. Investors wanted to build a house there. They had to build that exact same house. It came from the 1790s. Yeah. Now, Creole is a Spanish word that means the offspring of their colonies. So if you were Spaniards and you went to one of their colonies and had children, they would be Creole. Spelled C-R-I-L-L, Creole. But when they came here, the Spanish did, now they had to adapt to the French. These were French people. And the French had already implemented the Code Noir, the Black Code, which gave the Africans the right to become free. Free people of color, man, dig it. In the South, 1700s, this little city had free people of color. So our Creole manifested into French, Spanish, African. When the Americans came, they were so appalled at the way the French were living, you know, with carnival and Catholicism and free people of color and all. So they settled on the other side of Canal Street. That was called the American sector. The Faubourg St. Mary's. Canal Street was a great neutral ground between the Americans and the haughty French-speaking Creole. Now, the first two African cultures that came here was the Bambara and the Pakanga culture from West Africa, where my wife's folks are from. They're the ones that struggled to become free, and they're the ones that introduced voodoo to this region, the oldest religion in the world, voodoo. The reason why I point over there, man, on the other side of Rampart Street is Armstrong Park. Next to it is the old Conga Square, where our free people of color and slaves practice their voodoo rituals on the Sabbath. Now, take away the doll, the black magic, the hoodoo, that was all the Western influence, not Africa. In Africa, it was the first time man started praying to God spiritually. And how did they get to that spiritual place? Music and dance, man. On the Sabbath, to be thousands of Africans beating African drunk, playing primitive fiddles and banjos, and all that music would radiate into the French Quarter. When you became free, you were baptized Catholic, but you could still practice voodoo. You were taught how to speak French, and if you didn't learn a trade, they sent the boys to Paris, to college. You could read and write music and play the violin. Now, the third African culture comes along with the Americans, and sadly they were kept as slaves right on the other side of Canal Street, just a street away. That guy couldn't read or write a lick, but he could play the cornet. There was a lot of tension between these two African cultures. You know where they settled their differences? Over there by the old cemeteries, man. Off of Basin Street was a place called Storyville. That's where the nightclubs were, not Bourbon Street. Those were all homes. La La's Big 25, Lulu White's Mahogany Hall. And that's where they got together and they created this fusion of music called jazz. Where all the white and the dark folks meet. Heaven on earth, call it Basin Street. Basin Street, the birthplace of jazz. Sorry, the voice is kind of hoarse, but you got my point, right? So, I'm going to tell you one of the best stories ever to come out of New Orleans. There's a lot of them, right? One guy started jazz. His name was Charles Buddy Bolden. Charles Buddy Bolden had a cornet and he taught himself how to play. Got himself a job at Storyville playing ragtime. One night he went into this other personality, and off of ragtime he starts doing improv. Man, it caught on. Jelly Roll, Morton, King Oliver, and the boys, they're all doing improv off of ragtime. Jazz is born. One day or night, I don't know which one it was, but Charles Buddy Bolden was in a parade. And he went crazy and he started foaming at the mouth. They thought he had dementia, so they put him in an institution. And when that man died at 52 years of age, the doctors reanalyzed his condition. He was schizophrenic. And schizophrenia, it's your other personalities are usually your creative ones. And it was Charles Buddy Bolden's other personality that created jazz. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah,
a Tulane professor told me that. Not that I went to Tulane, I just know the cat, okay? So, when you go by these buildings in the French Quarter, you notice all these doors are closed. These are the back sides of the building. The true heart and soul of the Creole family is on the other side. It opens up in the courtyards and patios. You go through the breezeway or a carriageway to get to the front of the house. That's made a garage now because they redid Now, the original architecture of the French Quarter, guys, is those right across the street. Those are French Creoles. They had a renaissance and they brought these back in the 1700s. We have some that dig back in the early 1700s that are still around after the fires. You know why? Because of those slate tile roofs. Ursuline nuns came here in the early 1700s. Sadly, the mentality that we get here like tomorrow night in Mardi Gras, when people see the nuns leaving, they think they're still in costume. The ladies are holding on to the rosaries and stuff, man. That's 2 weeks of non-professional drinking is Mardi Gras. Here, this is a raised American cottage. That's an American. See the columns? Whenever you see columns? The last one that was built in the garden is a 22,000 square foot version of this one. Frances Parkinson Case lived here, the authoress, and P.T. Beauregard, one of the Confederate generals, lived here at one time. See that? The raised American cottage. A little bit different than the French Creoles over there. See how small the doors are? French average around 5'2". So if you're 5'6", you're pretty much the center of the basketball team. So the nuns left, but not before they built this beautiful church, St. Mary's, 1845. So these are built as doubles, same as some of those call it. You put your common law wife in one side, and she can rent out the other side, free it up to when you came to visit with her. Those ladies were called placette women. I'll tell you, when you were a young man in this culture here, your marriage was already arranged. So when you became of age, your father would take you to a ball where they would have beautiful women of color, octoon, quadroon, mulattoes, beautiful black ladies. And you could select one as your placette, that means place, the act of plaçage, placing one with another. But if you did, you had to buy her house and put her up with the rest of her life with her own set of servants and all. 40% of the Treme, 40% of the Marigny homes were owned by placette women. Now, you kept your placette woman after your arranged marriage. Okay, you go to the opera, sit in the booth with your wife. At intermission, you go visit with your placette woman with the screened in booth. The women got so jealous of this through the years that they went to Governor Miro and they passed a law that no women of color can show their hair. So these women took these silk scarves with brilliant colors and they wrapped them up, put jewels on them, and flaunted them in the street and made them even look prettier. Those headdresses are called tirons. That only happen in New Orleans. That's why when you see Marie Laveau, paintings of her, and she was a placette woman after her 2-year marriage to Jacques Pelly. This has been totally restored inside. You go through the carriageway to get in there. When you stay at the Sonia House, you really enjoy that old world charm. That's a hotel. Totally restored, beautifully in there. You can do what you want to do with these buildings. You can restore them. You can break them up into apartments, condominiums, inside. Hot towel. These are all American era. Look at the carriageway here. Look through it. Okay guys, you see the Regional Hotel? I have to point out that there's a suite upstairs named after Sir Paul McCartney, who stayed here for 2 months when he did one of his Wings albums, Band on the Run. Does anybody not know who Paul McCartney is? Oh! No!
You know who he is.
You would be surprised at the blank stares I get now. It's a new generation out there. A guy nudged his girlfriend the other night and said, "Don't you remember? He's the guy that played with Michael Jackson." One freaking video, that's what they remember him at. These buildings over here are called shotgun homes. You can open up the front door, back door, shoot a shotgun straight through without hitting anything. Shotgun. See the big White House on the corner? It used to belong to Nicolas Cage when he was married to Lisa Marie Presley. So the Creole family that's here, right? And then you have the courtyard, and then you have the slave quarters. Slaves lived up on top, kitchens were down below, away from the main house. All Africans that came over here were slaves. But they worked hard, and they could pay $200, and you could buy your freedom. You were also willed it. Free people of color here bought slaves, not to own them, to freedom, to family members and friends. After the Civil War, the people that were most affected down here were the free people of color, because that's when they introduced Jim Crow. That's when those statues got erected, right after the Civil War. Okay, you see this? That's a double shotgun. See the orange building? It comes with its own security system up there. See that? 2-bedroom, 1 bath on either side. It's all handmade glass, just beautifully restored. 2,500 square feet. It's at a reduced price right now, guys. $1.3 million. That's yours. Guys, you're only a block away from Frenchman Street over here, man, where all the brass bands and blues and everything. You can crawl home if you had to. That's worth the .3 right there. Double shotguns. So, see this cast iron? That's the live oak leaf with acorns. Look closely. The beautiful live oaks of Louisiana. They are not indigenous here. The Europeans brought them over here 400 years ago, but they mutated and adapted to our climate and everything. Now look next to it. You see those poles with the spikes on them? My daughter just turned 11 years old. Windmill pitcher, 8-0, 62 strikeouts. But anyway, I'm having those poles put around our house as we speak because she's getting a little older. Those are called Romeo poles, put there by the daddies in the old days. So if a guy wanted to crawl up the second floor where the daughters are at, he'd go up as a Romeo, but come down as Juliet. Romeo pole.
That's on the front one.
Over here to the left, we have 2 ladies standing. 2 ladies standing. Chop, chop. Hip there, hip there. Now coming up to the left, looming through the trees, is the most haunted house in New Orleans. This is the LaLaurie Mansion, where the horrible, despicable French Creole couple used to torture the servants. Anybody they would find on the street. Dauphine LaLaurie has not been here for 200 years to defend herself. There's no documentation of the torture, okay? One lady owns the trademark to that building, and she made the American Horror Story go across the street. She simply just doesn't believe in the torturing stuff. Now, Cindy, who I'll show you, has the oldest art gallery in the French Quarter, okay? She will literally show you hundreds of photographs that she's taken herself of orbs and apparitions. When they were restoring this, she saw one staring at her about a foot off the ground. There are spirits in every one of these buildings, guys. You just got to be open to receive them. I've never heard any stories of ghosts hurting anybody. Have you? It's the vampires you need to look out for. Just ask my ex-girlfriends, blood suckers, every one of them. So Cindy is very good friends with Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage bought that. It was all broken up into apartments. He tore off the drywall, exposed the gingerbread, and returned that to a one-family dwelling. He didn't leave because he was afraid of ghosts. He didn't lose any buildings to the IRS. That's all lies in chat, okay? Nicolas Cage sold buildings he had, even an island to pay back his Bernie Madoff bird, okay? Those are all lies and tales. 5 days after Katrina, Nicolas Cage gave the city of New Orleans $1 million. So if you hear anybody talking bad about Nicky, you tell me come talk to Showtime. Unless they're like really large and angry, and then you can take care of them. This guy that bought it from Houston, that's about a $10 million home now. Look, they put a little display on here for Halloween. No, the guy from Houston rarely visits here. Cindy actually comes down here and takes care of it for him every once in a while. Now, when Brad Pitt purchased Plantation to come live in the French Quarter, that's the house they use in Interview with a Vampire.
Really?
The Gallier House.
Where's Brad Pitt's house at, man?
Off of Governor Nichols.
Really?
Right down here.
Old one?
By Decatur Street.
Is it old or fairly new? It's the old one, right?
About 1860s.
Yeah, well.
They restored it.
Wow.
Now,
So big.
see this flickering gas lights? All totally restored. Isn't that beautiful? One couple comes here when they want to. They're here this weekend. That's all handmade glass. Every week of Halloween, people gather here to worship that building. That's where the vampire lives, St. Jacques Germain. Now picture this. 1958, one morning, a woman at this spot, horse and wagon, selling crawfish. Vendors, remember? See up there where those people are sitting on the second floor? Out comes Elvis Presley and sings the crawfish song in the best movie he ever did, King Creole.
Really?
You're in the opening scene right now. You can YouTube that while you're eating your beignets. Look back there. You'll see that about 4 different times. The only difference is you're looking at it in black and white. Now, over here is a public school. That's Madonna 15, named after John McDonough. That's where my little boys are going to school right before Katrina, pre-K and K.
Really?
Actually, little Dylan was all stoked up to go to his first day of school, August 29, 2005. Now, Ian and Dylan had graduated there. We didn't evacuate. They would have been amongst the alumni of Little Richard Simmons, Truman Capote, Lee Harvey Oswald, and Elvis Presley in King Creole. That's where he beats up his classmate right there in the parking lot. Now here it is, guys. Here is the trademark signed by her lawyers. Right there in the window. With pictures of orbs right next to it. That's Cindy's place. She'll tell you all about Nicolas Cage. They're really close. 8 generations Siciliano. Another great thing she has in there, she has a photograph of Jim Morrison and his wife Pam on her gallery. She took herself before he went to Paris and died. This is where the doors broke up, man. The Royal Sonesta Hotel. Got a big old beer. And speaking of Sicilian, this is the old Rufino Bakery. You could arguably say, still, this should be called the Sicilian sector. Okay? See Rufino. After the Civil War, the Bureau of Immigration was formed, and they brought the Sicilians over here. Not New York or Chicago, first point of entry. First mafia godfather of America, Lucky Sam, that was his house. But when the Sicilians got here, they didn't do much cotton picking like the Bureau wanted. When they got here, after the Civil War, picture this, most of the French quarters empty. The biggest emphasis was the American sector. This was all empty and falling apart, man. So the Sicilians migrated right into the French Quarter. And they worked hard, they rebuilt, they built bars and restaurants, but when they got here, the Irish dominated the police department. So a lot of times, Sicilians would change their last names to Irish names. The Martini family were grocers and they changed the name to Martin. The streetcar line went on strike and they felt sorry for the strikers. So they went to the Gendusa family, the bakers, and asked to bake them a loaf of bread with 2 rounded ends. And that's where our light, flaky, wonderful, crunchy bread comes from. And they stuffed that bread with meats and cheeses and they gave it to the strikers and they called the strikers the po' boys. You gotta feed the po' boys, man. You cannot get a po' boy outside Louisiana, and there's many places in Louisiana you can't get a po' boy. You know why? It's the bread. It's only made here in the city. It's the water and the climate that makes it that way. Huh? You gotta take my tour to find that out. If you want to call her Mary, that's fine, sir. Okay. I hear you, man. Tough being single these days. So those are 6-pounder Napoleons right there, man. Shot a 6-pound cannonball came out of there on fire. So have you guys had your beignets yet? You know
We've had
what
them
Cafe de
before.
Monde means in English? Cafe of the World. That was a free woman of color, Rose Nicole. She bought her freedom for $200. She set up a coffee stand there in 1862. There's a coffee shop named after Rose on Frenchman Street. There it is, Frenchman Street, right down there. Help, 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 help. So if you get a chance, want to at least go into Tujague's and get a cocktail, look at that old bar. You'll be staring at a mirror that was brought there in 1856 from Paris. Okay? Remember to celebrate the 200th anniversary, man. Hey, Fred. That's a mule skinner right there. Fred's trained more mules than you can shake a stick at. That's a real mule trainer. He also shows walking horses and stuff like that. All right, Fred? Not easy to train these animals. 1.5 times stronger than a horse, especially with all this stuff going on. I've been on a runaway trainer going over mediums with a 4,000-pound buggy behind it. It's kind of fun. Get that! Pound out! 24 hours, 364 days a year that's open. You got plenty of time to get there. Cafe du Monde. Cafe of the World.
The donut place I was talking about.
Those aren't donuts. Donuts have a hole in them. It's a square pastry, deep fried like a donut dough. Lots of powdered sugar on it. You know what I tell people when I see it? It looks like you had breakfast at Charlie Sheen's house.
We're being escorted at all.
Yeah.
I like that. Check out the Beetlejuice poster. I like that one. All the R2 stuff too.
So guys, there's buggies that took off after we started our tour. We've already been back in. I like to be as thorough as I possibly can, so if anybody asks, we got stuck behind a garbage truck.